Hello, my name is James Olson. I am in the Mechanical, Aerospace, and Nuclear Engineering Department at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Today, I'll be talking about a strategy my colleagues and I have been working on that will offer a new approach for nuclear technology to help state governments and the federal government achieve their goals related to clean energy. Please note, our work is currently supported by the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Consent-Based Siting. You can learn more at energy.gov/consent-based siting. The motivation for our funded work with the DOE is to support the development of a consent-based siting process for the interim storage of spent nuclear fuel. The motivation for our attendance in this conference is to discuss how our strategy for consent-based siting process development opens pathways to reconsider lingering concerns about nuclear safety, proliferation, cost, and many other topics that have prevented the industry from achieving its full potential. If time is running out and devastating changes at a global scale are just around the corner, we hope to open a dialogue about how we can take advantage of the momentum that is building around the potential deployment of new nuclear reactors. Rather than ask everyone to put aside their concerns that these plants can be built, our strategy invites willing participants to aid in the development and deployment of alternative nuclear technology that has already been demonstrated and can be used to design, certify, and deploy additional energy resources that can be optimized for modern energy markets and environmental needs. We feel these alternative reactors can significantly contribute to the achieving climate goals while providing relief from certain problems that were created during the early years of nuclear development. The first aspect of our strategy is to start from an objective position. We use a simplified engineering screening analysis to help decide which energy resources are best positioned to meet the near-term climate goals. The traditional market segments of renewable, fossil, and nuclear energy have inherent constraints that unnecessarily complicate trade-off discussions. By normalizing all currently available energy resources to a per atom basis, we provide an objective foundation for energy resource comparison. For example, instead of wind and biofuels both being in the same energy category, we classify wind as motion energy and biofuels as chemical energy. One advantage of this new approach to energy segmentation is to better help industry build business cases for investor support. The next few slides contain the information we use to perform our simplified engineering analysis. The first category we consider is motion energy. Since we are focused on achieving near-term and time-sensitive goals, we're using an order of magnitude screening analysis. Our assumptions are listed here, and as you can see, some of them are unrealistically generous to avoid potential negative bias. For wind, we use the mass of an oxygen molecule and the highest wind velocity ever recorded to calculate the kinetic energy available. For hydro, we use water mass and the height of the tallest dam ever built to calculate the potential energy available. In both instances, we see the motion energy is in the milli-electron volt per atom scale. As we move on to the chemical energy segment, we can use existing data tables to convert known energy resources that are typically listed in megajoule per kilogram to electron volt per atom. The electron volt per atom assessment for chemical energy makes sense considering the physical structure of the electron shell is well known. No matter how we restructure or engineer the chemical bonds in the electron shell, those electron energy levels are known to exist in the electron volt range. In our simplified engineering approach, we include all forms of solar energy technology in the chemical energy segment, since the sun's rays are interacting with the electrons and their targets. Similar to the electron shell, the nucleus of an atom has known energy levels. Non-fission decay energy can be harnessed in certain practical devices, such as beta voltaics for pacemakers. While these decay energies tend to be in the mega electron volt range, those energies are captured in the electron shell, and therefore we classify non-fission decay energies as electron volt per atom, similar to how we classified solar technologies. For fission energy, a widely accepted guideline is that 200 mega electron volts is released for every fission, regardless of the atom being fissioned. Since fusion is not yet available, we are ignoring its potential contribution. Since fission provides the most energy per atom, it starts us as close as possible to deploying energy technologies at the terawatt scale. Rather than continue pushing alternative versions of light water reactor technology that has been resisted since its inception, we propose restoring the development of an alternative reactor that has been successfully demonstrated by the U.S. military and later rejected during the submarine reactor technology down select process. As we will show in the coming slides, this alternative reactor type, a liquid metal reactor, better aligns with environmental sustainability and climate goals. In the spirit of transparency, we are not opposed to the deployment of additional light water reactors to achieve near-term climate goals. Over the long run, we would like to see light water reactors be sunset in favor of liquid sodium or other advanced reactors that can consume uranium-238 or thorium-232. Essentially, we're proposing a new product development program at a national scale. Our strategy proposes the immediate deployment of a government-funded, academia-managed, and industry-optimized research and prototyping facility. The primary purpose of this facility is to develop 2 derivative plants that will be described in greater detail in subsequent slides. Once these derivative plants have been deployed, we will have a nuclear industry with energy technology options that can be optimized to meet the needs of modern ecosystem and consumer demands. In industrial applications, the concept of converting waste into additional revenue streams is common practice. For the nuclear industry, we currently do not have an option to reduce the waste associated with extracting our fuel from nature. In fact, as we try to increase our enrichment, which means we rely more heavily on uranium-235, we end up creating more waste in the form of unused uranium-238. Continuing to and increasingly relying on the scarcity of uranium-238 while faced with the abundance of uranium-238 can be considered environmentally irresponsible. For the record, we're not advocating for the elimination of uranium-235 as a reactor fuel, but rather adding the capacity to also utilize uranium-238. Many of us are familiar with the history of the atomic bomb, even more so with the recent release of the Oppenheimer film. A few of us may be familiar with the submarine technology that was developed after the atomic bomb. Even fewer of us are aware that the military developed 2 submarines, each with different reactors, before choosing the light water reactor design. If you want to know more about the details related to why the military preferred light water, how the current light water reactor fleet was developed, as well as how private industry was advocating for the commercialized version of the liquid sodium reactor and subsequently blocked by the US military, we suggest you read The Rickover Effect by Theodore Rockwell. All of these issues are documented in great detail. Our strategy starts with restoring progress from the Seawolf liquid sodium reactor plant. We want to take a quick pause and touch on an obvious concern regarding nuclear technology in general. A critical aspect of aligning nuclear technology with climate initiatives is to establish the ability for the general public to form their own opinions regarding the risks and rewards of a new nuclear technology without the need to rely on so-called experts. We feel a necessary component of this process is the development of a nuclear science and technology curriculum that will be available for public consumption. This new curricula, combined with the Civilian Research Center, can serve as the foundation for an informed voter base that can support or protest the nuclear industry as desired, as it pursues technology that should be consistent with the wants and needs of energy consumers. Our team has been working on developing activities that may serve as the basis for incorporating these concepts within elementary, middle school, and high school lesson plans. In all subsequent slides, we assume the general public is involved in and leading the necessary workforce development and public education activities as desired. So basically, the first step is just to go back to where we left off. Rebuild the Seawolf prototype in a location where prototypes have already been successfully built. There are 3 major justifications for the first step. Number 1, we're relying on previously demonstrated technology the US military did not accept. We're advocating for the transfer of this technology to the non-military sector using appropriate controls. 2, this plant can serve as a civilian energy research center to develop and demonstrate future nuclear reactor technology, as well as other fuel source technology, such as geothermal or other under-resourced industries. And number 3, this will enable the maturing of workforce development components prior to deploying a new reactor fleet. Apologies to the great state of Illinois for using their name without first getting their permission. We have not spoken with anyone in Illinois regarding their agreement with this strategy. We're simply looking across the nation at potential sites that can have the biggest impact if these new reactors are deployed. If Illinois were to have a reactor that can consume the energy within spent nuclear fuel, a significant portion of the transportation required to consolidate this waste would be eliminated. If Illinois took the additional step of accepting nuclear fuel from neighboring states on an interim basis, the cost and risks of shipping spent fuel will be further reduced. A key thing to remember is, if we are truly committing to deploying a new nuclear fleet, transportation of spent nuclear fuel will become a commonplace activity. If Illinois were so inclined, it could also serve as a spent nuclear fuel transportation research center to help ensure this new activity be performed safely, properly, and transparently. Before going on to the next step, I want to take a bit of time to discuss why we're advocating for 2 derivative plants instead of 1. The transportation sector represents a significant portion of emissions that are of concern in the context of climate goals. The transportation sector is predominantly fueled by petroleum. If we singularly focus on electrifying the entire transportation sector, we face numerous insurmountable obstacles regarding the replacement of legacy infrastructure. An alternative approach is to grow a fleet of nuclear-powered ships plus an infrastructure of synthetic hydrocarbon fuel production facilities to displace fossil fuels. If we can imagine an infrastructure where all existing transportation fleets are either electrified or using synthetic fuels, we can imagine a carbon-neutral transportation infrastructure without the need to replace internal engine combustion infrastructures. Similar apologies to the great state of Pennsylvania for using their name without first getting their permission. We have not spoken with anyone in Pennsylvania either, but since they have the second largest inventory of spent nuclear fuel behind Illinois, almost a quarter of this type of waste can be consumed in place if Pennsylvania and Illinois chose to host this type of facility. Additionally, if Pennsylvania were so inclined, they could serve as a synthetic fuels research center to accelerate the transition from natural to synthetic liquid fuel consumption. Another global need that can be served by the realization of civilian nuclear-powered ships is humanitarian aid, decoupled from strategic military assets. One example of how the U.S. Navy uses nuclear-powered ships for humanitarian aid is in the aftermath of the December 2004 tsunami in northern Indonesia. A lot of great work was done there, but certain suspicions were instigated by the mere presence of U.S. military personnel. If we can decouple the benefit of naval nuclear propulsion from military applications, our global humanitarian aid will achieve an unprecedented capability. If we cannot get international agreement on resources such as these, we suggest the federal government commission a maritime vessel optimized for modern shipping industry needs, including the ability for synthetic fuel production while underway on nuclear power. In summary, we're proposing the transfer of nuclear technology from military archives to the public in support of achieving climate goals. If we take a holistic approach to designing and optimizing the technology originally favored by the civilian industry, we have an opportunity to address lingering concerns about nuclear technology, many of which are related to the militarization of the atomic nucleus rather than the atomic nucleus itself. Additionally, there are many social factors related to the initial development and deployment of the nuclear fleet. Personally, I was unaware how much tribal nations have been affected by nuclear technology development and deployment until I started working with the Department of Energy on consent-based siting process development. I'm not here to tell anyone what to think or believe, but I personally would like the opportunity to develop a technology that minimizes harm and maximizes benefit. If these steps are taken and the general public still feels like there's no place for nuclear energy, I will happily yield to the power of freedom and follow the majority opinion. Until these steps are taken, we feel it's fair to conclude the nuclear industry has not yet had the opportunity to decide its own fate. One final note regarding our ongoing research. A major component of our funded work is community engagement. An obvious lesson learned is that people tend to disengage immediately upon hearing that we're working on a nuclear waste research grant. However, once we're able to discuss our strategy, which is largely consistent with everything presented here today, we find people tend to be very supportive of the opportunity to be involved in the decision-making process for nuclear technology development and deployment. In my professional opinion, the history of nuclear technology is simply too traumatic to continue on without a major reassessment. Transferring the military liquid sodium reactor to the general public in the form of a research center enables new approaches to addressing legacy problems, including interim storage and final dispensation of spent nuclear fuel. We encourage everyone to think how access to a civilian energy research center might support your personal and community interests. If there are any shared interests, we'd love to continue the discussion at your convenience and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah. So while we're always thinking, I do like have one, and this is really out of curiosity because the research center in Munich is actually a former nuclear research center where I'm hosted, and what we're seeing is in fact this great divide in countries' decision regarding nuclear power, right? Because France, for example, is quite in favor. Germany, just next door, my home country, has decided, and has build sort of the nuclear phase out. So what is the general trend here regarding nuclear policy?
We're similarly divided typically by region, like the Northeast is kind of was in the game early and then got out in the 70s. And then the South, they're very supportive. I think the piece that is the most, I'll say, positively disruptive in our research is when people learn that there's another option and that some development activities can be occur with their actual vote as opposed to the clandestine version. They tend to be supportive of that option.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
So your two questions in your participatory community engagement. Have you been to either national nuclear facilities at a bridge where they are, of course, using spent fuel? Are you including discussion with the scientists who have been big custodians of this technology for so very long?
Yeah, they're actually the managers of the grant that we're on. It's a collaborative agreement, and so we talk, but we're able to do our kind of own thing. I'll say independently, but very collaboratively. So yeah, they're definitely engaged.
So the cost of the mass nuclear reactor in the US, the 2 units has a proposal of 35 going to 36 billion, according to the developers of that. The step down through the learning process is potentially significant, but it's going to take many, many units to make such reactors competitive with what we can produce with solar and wind today, with even the storage. So what do you think about the big ticket costs of these new nuclear technology? Do you think this would be different and the first reactor could be more competitive? Or
I will say there's 2 contributing factors that I think justify reassessing nuclear at the holistic level. The first of which, if you look into the history, the civilian industry always favored liquid metal over light water reactors because the economics are inherently favorable. The second is the energy market shifted in the 1990s with deregulation under George Bush Jr. And so these reactors that you're talking about were not designed and optimized for the modern energy markets that are much more competitive. So we're kind of comparing wind and solar in a modern space that they're kind of designed for to what I'll say is a product that hasn't been optimized. So those factors kind of converge to, I think, taking another look at developing a more modern solution.
Yeah, I just sort of following on that as you look at other successful nuclear reactors, like UAE has brought in their low cost on time. And so I guess there's obviously history of other successful these are large reactors. But the other part that you talk about is how do you get the public engaged in a way that feels comfortable with the information and details and have a dialogue that kind of moves beyond, your fear factor and is informed.
So the first response will be, we're still trying to get our pool finished being installed. So I want to talk about delays and cost overruns. That's broadly applicable to above and beyond nuclear. But we actually just recently finished a 2-week summer camp with high school students from across the country. And we developed novel ways to help them learn the fundamentals and make decisions for themselves. And they've been very supportive, and we kind of dissipate the fear. One example of a exercise we did was we pulled up this was after several days of these kind of learning modules. We pulled up the Fukushima timeline. We talked through what had happened. We pulled up the CDC's radiation thermometer and was in the weeds on radiation health and safety, and they were completely engaging. And we're excited to see that level of engagement, and we're interested in doing more in the future. So we're having some success.
I'm just curious, what is the state of Illinois position on this thing?
Oh, no, I apologize. They haven't said anything about it yet. It's just they've been in the nuclear industry largely. They have the most spent nuclear fuel. And while the Department of Energy is trying to work on consolidated storage, we're not looking for facilities yet. I'm not signing up to Illinois. It's just the transportation costs, the traveling, the risk with every mile on the rail. evaporates significantly if you can consume it in place. So it's just an idea. But if Illinois is interested, then give me a call.
It'll have to go.
Sounds good. We would love that.
All right. Yeah, would you
Yeah,
have-
I think one of the other issues that we gained, this is obviously the human factor and the regulatory aspects, and of course, if you go to Fukushima or something like that, I think a lot of people will argue, but there was a siting issue, but also a regulatory sort of oversight issue, and so I think it's not the technology so much, but the other sort of, surrounding aspects.
So I would submit, I feel it is a technology aspect related to the light water reactor and its propensity to become a steam plume in an emergency situation that drives those regulatory issues. We had an alternate technology that didn't have the steam plume issue. We're now on a different path.
But the regulatory process is so protracted, and to get the Mossad reactor siting approved on the bridge took forever, and it's not in the near term in terms of its development. And so we have to transform the regulatory process to do anything with reasonable concept.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm excited to try.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much.